Sebastian Zuccardi, the legacy, the man, the myth, the legend. Thank you very much for joining Binny's. Thanks for joining me, Gabriel. I am the wine manager at Lincoln Park Binny's, and everyone else in Chicago right now. How are you doing?
Very good, and thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and it's a really pleasure for me.
It's a huge thrill for me because I was lucky enough to join you in Mendoza back in March and absolutely fell in love with the wines and just blew me away what was happening with Malbec. It was just an eye-opening experience. So really excited to have you here, be able to talk about some of these wines with us.
We are very lucky because we live and we cultivate in a fantastic place, and really, I'm also very lucky because my family started with wine, and now is my passion.
Yeah, you are, for those at home that may not know, you are the third generation winemaker for Zuccardi, correct?
Yes, my grandfather started in the 63. He had no relationship with wine. He had a building company. And where we live is a desert where the only way to cultivate is with irrigation. And he developed a very efficient irrigation system at that time. And he bought the property near to Mendoza. But his idea was not dedicated to agriculture. His idea was use the vineyard like a showroom in order to sell his irrigation system. And
There
luckily
you
for
go.
me, he discovered that his passion was the agriculture. And okay, now we are the third generation of Zuccardi making wine.
That's amazing. That's such a cool story. Um, Before jumping up, definitely going to talk about terroir. We're definitely going to talk about this amazing place that your grandfather started a winery. But first, I have to congratulate you. You guys won the world's best vineyard from the International Wine Challenge in Canopy Magazine 2019.
Yes, it
That
was a
is,
surprise because it was for two times in row. It was a, really, we didn't expect it, and was a big surprise.
two times in a row. And for the viewers at home that maybe haven't had a chance to see the winery, it is stunning. It is unbelievable what you guys have done with it. And the hospitality there is bar none. It is wonderful.
You
I don't
know,
know if you have a,
we have the landscape is fantastic because we have the Andes mountain that is the key of our wines. And the winery, like you say, is inspiring in the Andes mountain, and it's all building with local materials. So I think the main important thing of the winery is that it has a very strong sense of place. When you visit the vineyard and the winery, you know that is something that is unique because the relationship with the place.
yeah, definitely. Um, Real quick, wanted to just talk about you for a moment because again, you're the third generation winemaker. You're very young, as a winemaker. How did you jump into the role in Zuccardi? How did you kind of take the reins from your father, and kind of what was your vision going into it?
You know, like I told you, I'm the third generation. I studied viticulture. I didn't study enology. I grow in the vineyards. When all my remembers when I was a kid was in the vineyard with my father because my father really loved to manage the vineyards. And when I really fell in love with the activity and I decided to study viticulture. So I started working in the family in the vineyards, not in the winery. And when I joined the family, I was very, for me, it was very clear that the family has to move to cultivate to the Uco Valley because the Uco Valley is is the highest place to cultivate in Mendoza, and it's really near to the mountain. And I was looking for the mountain effect. So I convinced my family that the future has to be in the Uco Valley. And I started cultivating in the Uco Valley. And in 2009, I said to my father, okay, I have a lot of idea how to manage a vineyard, but I have a lot of questions about the manage that we do in the vineyard, how impact in the wine. So I told him that I wanted to start with the research and development area in the winery. And this was my first step in the winery, was when I decided to cross the street from the vineyard to the winery. And I started with the research and development area in 2009. And really, this was a revolution for me, but also for the family. And today, yes, I not alone because I'm part of a big team, but I lead this team. My work in the family is runs the vineyards and make the wines. And all my view during this way, because I started in the vineyard, was respect the place. So I try that my wines all the time has a very big respect from the place where the grapes are coming. I like to say that we don't make wines, we cultivate wines, because the most important thing is the place and then our work in the vineyard.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Yeah, that's really cool that you kind of came in from the R&D aspect. You're looking at it from the agricultural standpoint, which is such a huge aspect of Argentina as it is. But yeah, it's curious that was kind of the winemaking was second, especially when you taste the wines and you see how much of your passion goes into them. You would think you were a winemaker from the get-go.
You know, I'm a drinker before a winemaker. My passion is wine. I love wine. It's my life. I travel to other places to visit. I really I'm all the time thinking which is the next wine that I will open. I try to open a lot of wine from friends from Argentina and wines from all over the world in order to put with my wines, because I think if you want to learn, you need to open your mind. So really wine is my passion. And I'm very lucky that my family started with this, because it was a great opportunity for me. But really, every time that I think in wine, I think in place. For me, the place is the most important thing. And I learned this traveling around the world. So in 2008, I told to my family, okay, we need to go in the place direction. And all the work that we have been doing in research and development was a little bit try to make wines that can be transparent to the place where we are cultivating.
Certainly. So that leads me to an interesting question, because I see a map of the Côte de Beaune behind you. Do you think in your travels and definitely starting off in the wine world, when looking at the Uco Valley, did you see some resemblance to Burgundy, or did you kind of think of it in a Burgundian fashion when looking at where should I be putting vineyards and what would work the best?
You know, when I see every region is different, and because the weather and the geology is different. So the Uco Valley, of course, is different to Burgundy. But one thing that the Uco Valley is very interesting is the diversity that we have inside, because we are very close to the mountain, and the mountain really has a very big impact in our wines. I like to say that we make mountain wines, that everything that happened in the area has a very deep relationship with the mountain, the weather, the soil, the water that we use to irrigate, and our culture also. And when you see the Uco Valley and the relationship with the mountain, you can see that we have a very big diversity. First, because we cultivate in different altitudes, and every time that you change the altitude, you change the weather. Every time that you go up, you are moving to a cooler weather, and in very short distance, you can climb many meters. So you have different weather situations. But then the soils are all alluvial soils. All the material came from the Andes Mountain, and this Andes Mountain that is huge and is very, I don't know, it's fantastic, has a lot of diversity because the geology origin is diverse. And then these alluvial movements create a lot of variation from one area to other, but also inside of the same area. So I can see that if I have to say what is the relationship with this map that I have in my back, is that we have a lot of diversity. And this sense of place that you can live in Burgundy, you can see in the Uco Valley. Then I think our work today is know our places, learn about the place, and maybe not today classify per level. Today is classified per weather and geomorphology situations.
Yeah, that is so cool. We actually have a question real quick, since you were mentioning elevation. That's such a large part of not only mountain wine, but just in general. When people are describing Argentinian wine, elevation plays a big part of it. What are the elevation ranges that we're talking about between the different wines, or the different vineyards, I should say?
You know, in the Uco Valley, I know that I have to talk in fits, but in the Uco Valley,
we can do the math at home. It's fine.
Okay, in the Uco Valley, you can cultivate from 900 meters of altitude until 1,700 meters of altitude. And altitude is really important because it's the main climate factor. But one thing that we have to know is it's not true that higher is better. The very important concept is that higher is cooler. Every time that you cultivate in a high altitude, in the same latitude, you are moving to a cooler weather. And when you move to a cooler weather, you have different styles of wines. In the Uco Valley, for me, the best areas are higher than 1,100 meters. But then, higher that, the style of 1,300 meters is different than 1,200 meters. And then you have different combinations in terms of the kind of soil that you are going to find in the area. But the faster way to talk about weather is through the altitude. And the magic is that in 20 kilometers, you can move from 900 meters to 1,700 meters. So you have completely different situations, and this gives us a lot of variations.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's, I mean, definitely. It's interesting that, and again, very similar to Burgundy, how, you know, aspect changes so much, and maybe necessarily being at the top doesn't always mean you're the best. And I guess, you know, putting those meters into feet, you're talking at roughly almost 4,000, you know, 1,200 meters, about almost 4,000 feet up there. And that's, you know, very substantial. I mean, if you think of some of the hills in California, even looking at the rockier parts of Santa Monica, I mean, that's about as high up as you're going to get. So, and you're finding grapes to be perfect right there. So that's wild.
And also, remember that in Argentina, if you move to the north, you can cultivate until close to 9,000 feet. So the altitude really that we cultivate in high altitude because our relationship with the mountain, and the mountain really create our weather conditions, because first isolate us from the ocean. We are very far from the Atlantic, but we are very close to the Pacific. So we have the Andes mountain in the middle, so we have no ocean influence. So when you compare Chile and Argentina, we are two areas that are divided by the Andes mountain, and this creates two completely situations. So we are wine countries that we are close, but in terms of weather, we are very, very different.
Yeah, no, certainly. It's fascinating. It's really just such an interesting spot. And it's really cool to see how much you're trying to harness that and harness the different places within there. And then kind of getting back, you were talking about these alluvial soils, and obviously when mountains are being formed, this is the great part about mountain wine for me, is altitude plays a big factor, climate, all that. But the soil types, I think, is what's most fascinating, because as these mountains came together, all of these alluvial soils are cropping down. What are some of the soil types you're seeing as you're kind of working your way across the mountain to these different places?
Yes, the interesting thing is that when you have to think how the mountains were formed, the energy of this crash of plates that create the Andes mountain is unbelievable. And also the diversity of materials that you can find in the Andes, because when you see the Andes, you think that it's only one wall. But when you see a satellite picture, you can see that you have different chains of Andes. And this chain have different origins. So when you go to the mountain, when you walk in really high altitude, you can find also the bottom of ocean. You can find fossils at 6,000 meters of altitude. Why? Wow. Because part of the Andes was under the water. And then all these alluvial movements that happen millions and millions, during millions and million years, move all these materials to our areas. And this creates a lot of variation in terms of soil in one area to the other, but also a lot of variation inside of the same area. And for example, you can find in places like Altamira, that is one of the villages in the Uco Valley, San Pablo, that is another village, or Gualtallari, you can find a combination of materials that are not very usual, like granite and calcium carbonate and calcare. And this is because the origin of the Andes and then how the soils were formed. But also inside of one property, you can have 10, 15, 20 different kinds of soils, because the movement was very disorganized. And I believe that we have a potential in all of this, because we have the opportunity to have a unique combination and then a big variation of soils from one property. So in one place, you can make 10, 15 different wines.
Yeah. How do you decide what wines are going to be made in these? I mean, you're observing, you're digging, you're looking, and that was actually a big part of the winery. You guys ended up having to replant the winery just after rebuilding it to accommodate for all these different plots. So what kind of thought goes into the grapes, of course, because Bernard is a big player, but Malbec is something that you want to be known for as well. Tempranillo, which was a huge hit for you guys. How do you guys decide what's going to go where?
You know, first, I believe that the future of Argentina is in places. So my focus when I make wines and when I talk about wines is trying to express the place. And I believe that the grape is the vehicle to express the place. But the vehicle is extremely important. It's not the same to make or to express our places with one grape than the other. But I put a lot of attention today into use not 10 different grapes. Try to choose the grapes that I think that express better the place. So if you see what I'm planting and what I have been planting in the last years is 70, 80% Malbec. And then I use Cabernet Franc, Chardonnay, Bonarda, and Torrontés. These are the grapes that I use. And in general, because I'm talking more about the place, about the vineyard, about the parcel, I in general use Malbec like the vehicle to express these places. And I think we are very lucky with Malbec because Malbec was not a marketing plan. It was something that happened in the field because when the immigration came to Argentina, they brought many grapes from Europe, from Spain, from Italy, from France. And then generation and generation of growers, they continue replanting Malbec because when you walk the vineyard, when you taste the grapes and when you make wine, you can realize how great is the adaptation to Malbec, the adaptation of Malbec to our place. So I think that Malbec is the best vehicle to express our places. So in general, Malbec is my main grape.
Great, very cool. And yeah, I mean, it definitely shows. Was that? I guess I'll move a little bit forward here onto the wines. We have three to kind of taste together today.
Yes.
And the first one is the Q series, and I think this is probably the series that you guys are just unanimously known for around the world. Can we talk about the Q series? What's going into the Q Malbec? What's making that special?
You know, Q is a very important wine for us because it was the first wine that my family decided to put our last name in the label in '97. Okay. So, and Q, the origin of Q was my father that he wanted to make a better quality wine. So he put Q in the vineyards because quality, and then he put in the label. But for me, Q is our like regional wine. So when I talk about Q, I'm talking about the Uco Valley. I try to make a wine that express my view of the Uco Valley. So the Malbec that you have there come mainly from two villages in the Uco Valley that I think are very representative from the Uco Valley, that is Paraje Altamira and Vista Flores. Again, when I want to make wines, and I'm not looking to make perfect wines because I think that the main important thing of a wine is the uniqueness, is the identity. So perfection is no something that I'm dreaming more about identity. So in general, when I think in wines, I think that I have to work a lot choosing the place, a lot doing a great viticulture, and then in the winery, I need to respect all this. So I try to avoid that my hands, that you can see too much my hands in the wine. So I'm very respectful with the ripening time. I try to avoid overripe in order to reduce the level of alcohol and looking for more layers in the nose. Then I work very sweet, trying to avoid over extraction in the winery. And then another thing that for me is I like, but I think we have to be very careful with the balance is oak, because oak is not part of the place, it's part of the winery. So in general, I ferment in concrete vats and then I age mainly in concrete and part in used oak. So this wine was 70% fermented and aging in concrete and 30% fermenting in concrete but aging in used oak barrels. Yeah. I believe that the wine needs to tell us three histories. First, the history of the place. And when you talk about the Uco Valley, you talk about the cooler weather, but very sunny and with a very powerful natural vegetation around the vineyard. So we are going to find fruit, but also we are going to find a lot of fresh expression like herbs, and the vineyard is surrounded by native herbs that smell fantastic, like thyme, for example. Then I want that the wine talk about our philosophy, and then talk about the year that the wine was made. That is extremely important.
Yeah, that's very interesting because a lot of people do just associate that there's going to be some vintage variation, but it can't be that much, especially in a $20 wine. When just as you're saying, I mean, you're letting the grapes just show themselves. You're letting Zuccardi's wines just come straight from the earth, straight from the ground, and it's showing what happened in that year. And I think that's great. I think it's wonderful to see just fresh, pure Malbec coming specifically from 2018, not something that's going to be reminiscent of just a house style.
You know, the problem is that for many years, we try to make Malbec like a Cabernet Sauvignon. And Malbec is completely different than Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a grape that is very delicate and is very sensible to oxygen and oak. So my challenge when I decided to change a little bit the style of the family was concentrate in the elegance, in the precision, not in the volume and powerful, looking for a wine that has balance and hoping will age very well.
Yeah, certainly. So we have one of our guests is asking if you could talk about the soils that are going into the Q Malbec.
In the Q Malbec, you have all alluvial soils, but because you have a mix of a couple of areas in the Uco Valley, Paraje Altamira is a very calcare area where you have granite and calcare. But then in Vista Flores, because it's far from the rivers, in general, you find stones that are only granite. So you have a big granite structure, but in some part of the Q Malbec, you have a lot of calcium carbonate. That for me, calcare is extremely important for the texture. I like the soil when you have calcare because you have more texture. So it's what I work a lot in the selection of the soils.
And that's great because you want the texture to be coming, again, from terroir versus being adulterated in oak and coming up with something that's a little more false to the varietal. So it's and the acidity on these wines are great too. I mean, everything is bright and it's fresh. It's not just this big, drowning, heavy red wine. It's got dark fruit flavors.
But what you say is part of also of our weather, because for many years we thought that we were cultivating in a warm area. But when you climb, when you go up in altitude, you can see that the average of temperature go down, and we have really cooler areas where we can cultivate. But these cooler areas has a very strong sunlight because we have more than 300 days with blue sky. So we cultivate in a cooler area with a very strong sunlight. So you have a lot of fruit, but you have freshness. And the wines in general are very crunchy in terms of the kind of freshness. But it's very important, the time of harvest. And for me, harvest time is maybe one of the most important decisions of a winemaker, because there is no machine that can do this, that can take this decision. You can analyze, but the harvest time, you need to be in the vineyard because you need to see the vineyard. You need to see the forecast in terms of how will be the weather, and you need to taste. And this is one of the main important decisions. And 2 days before is not the same that 2 days later. And this is for me, you define many things of the style of wine that you are going to do in the harvesting time.
Yeah, certainly. So just wanted to jump, and we're getting into some amazing details about what it is that you're trying to bring to Zuccardi right now. And I love talking about the Uco Valley, and I love talking about this specific place. And the wine that really showed me this was the Polygonos project. I left Argentina it's all I could think about leaving, and it's all I wanted to drink coming back. And the San Pablo Polygonos, but it is been, I think, one of my favorite wines this year, hands down. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about how, you established Q and you established these varietals you're working with in these places. What brought on the Polygonos project?
In my view, every time that I go up, I will not talk about the work in the winery, like all times. That many times the higher wine had more new oak, This is not my view to work. Every time that I go up, I will talk more about the place. And I try to be more specific about the place where the grapes are coming. So in Q, I talk about the Uco Valley. When I move to Polígonos, I will talk about the villages in the Uco Valley. So under Polígonos, I can vinify different villages in the Uco Valley. And San Pablo is one of the villages that you can find in the Uco Valley. But San Pablo is a very special one because San Pablo has a position that is very close to the Andes and in a very high altitude position, 1,400 meters of altitude. And wow. Because the altitude and because it's so close to the mountain is one of the coldest areas in the Uco Valley. So the frost is a nightmare there. And when I started cultivating, I didn't know about this because it was an area that was not very cultivated. So I convinced my father to go there, and my father told me, "Are you sure? Are you not sure that it's cold?" "No, don't worry. It's perfect." And when I started cultivating, I realized how cold is San Pablo and how is the influence of the Andes. And the second thing that showed me San Pablo is that what I thought about Malbec was only a small part of a Malbec, because when you cultivate Malbec in different areas, you have different expressions of Malbec. And San Pablo is maybe one of the most diverse expression of Malbec, because this altitude, this influence of the mountain in general, give you a Malbec that has less alcohol, higher acidity, and a lot of freshness. And also smell a little bit like a citrus. You have a lot of citrus expression in the nose. So San Pablo showed me a new face of Malbec.
Very cool. It definitely showed me that new face too, because this is just wildly complex. Even without drinking it, it's you know, you think of some of your best chateaus in Bordeaux, you think of some of your best domains in Burgundy, and just you want to smell the wine almost more than you want to drink it. And that's what I get from this wine. I get to sit in this glass for so long, and it's fascinating.
I like to put this wine in blind tastings with wines from all over the world, because in general people think that Malbec is concentrate and sweet, and when you taste this, you can confuse. You can say this is a Côte Rôtie or something completely different. And I like because can show a different face of Malbec.
Yeah, and I think the fruit profile gets a little bit wider in there as well. A lot of times you kind of you could focus in Malbec to a red fruit or a black fruit. This is really just all across the spectrum. And again, the vibrancy and acidity.
But really the place is San Pablo, because when you are there and you see the landscape, how close you are from the mountain, how smell the place, and then how cold are the nights, is amazing. For example, last night, I know that Chicago is very cold, but last night here in San Pablo, we have less than minus 10. So cooler than minus 10 Celsius. That for us is extremely cold.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's proper cold.
Yes.
So when looking at this wine, I know that when the new winery came about, there was the 9 concrete eggs that you guys, it was 9, correct?
More than 9.
More than 9. Oh, I only remember saying 9, but maybe I was looking.
No, we have, all our winery is made with concrete. All. I have a 100% concrete vat. I have no stainless steel.
Okay. So this wine is all being done in concrete, correct?
Yes. This wine was fermented and aged in concrete. I believe that concrete is a great partner in the style of wines that we are making, because it's a natural material, and all our concrete vats are made with stone, sand, and water from our vineyard. So the connection that we have from the vineyard to the winery is very, very strong. Concrete don't give any flavor to the wine, and because we use raw concrete, you have micro-oxygenation, but you don't have too much micro-oxygenation like a barrel, you have less. And for me, Malbec is a grape that like a little bit less the quantity of oxygen. So I find in concrete a great partner in the winery. But one thing that is important, I'm not doing nothing new. because when you see the wineries that were made in Argentina in the 30s, in the 20s, were made with concrete. So at the end, what we are doing is back to the future, is take all techniques to go to the future. And one thing that is very important, you can make a great wine in concrete, a great wine in stainless steel, and a great wine in oak. And you can make a very bad wine in concrete, a very bad wine in stainless steel, and a very bad wine in oak. The most important thing is the place and how you manage the vineyards. But then, in my philosophy, concrete is a great partner.
Yeah. How do you think concrete overall acts, once a wine is obviously, matured in concrete, how do you think that acts in the bottle? Do you think it has the same length of maturation in the bottle? Do you think that it hinders it somewhere?
I think it's not true that the aging potential depends on the oak. I think the aging potential depends on the place where you are cultivating, how you cultivate, and then how you vinify. I believe is the relationship of the aging potential is in the place. And the world is full of examples that can show that it's not a matter of oak, because you can find wines that were aging in oak and not age very well, and you can find wines that were aging in another materials and age fantastic.
Yeah, certainly. No, definitely.
For me, it's very important when you need to think in a wine that will age well, we need to focus not in the fat, more in the bones. We need to build a marathonist, not a physical culturist. So we need to put all our energy in try to look for balance, look for a good tannic structure and texture. And for me, when you have this, the wine will age much better.
Yeah. I'm really curious. I mean, I'm having a tough time not drinking all of these as soon as I can, but I'm really curious to see what happens to the bottle over the course of a few years. So we started diving really deep into what concrete eggs do, and I think it's fascinating because it's definitely something that as winemaking, develops and transcends, I think there's a lot of producers and a lot of trends to kind of get away from using these natural elements. And how can we speed the process up? How can we, maybe fake it a little bit? But you're really getting back to, like you said, just the tried and true. Here are the ways of winemaking that worked, X amount of years ago. They're still working today. And I think that leads us to our third wine here, Concreto, which I know is very special for you. So tell us a little more about Concreto. Tell us what's going on in this one.
Concreto is a wine that is very important for me because changed my way to vinify and gave me a lot of confidence in terms of naked the places. I told you that I started making wine in the research and development area, and really I started working in the research and development area at the beginning in the division in terms of soils. And then we continued working in order to respect the place. And Concreto is a wine that I try to show the texture of the place. I try to put all my energy in order to show the texture of the soils where these wines are cultivating, because this is Paraje Altamira, that is a village that is in the southwest of the Uco Valley, where the alluvial soils form a left in the area very big stones. So for example, when I planted this vineyard, I took out 1,000 tracks with stones. So the vineyard that I have there, the name is Infinite Stone, because I had never finished taking out the stones. And
that was the vineyard that built the wall around the winery, right?
And then I used many to build the winery, because all the winery is built was built with the stones from the vineyard. So I took out and then I used to build the winery. And but inside, I told you that we have a lot of diversity of soils inside of the same property. So in order to make Concreto, I choose the most stoniest and calcium carbonate soils in the property. So I harvest 200 kilos there, 500 kilos there, 1,000 kilos there, 400 kilos there. Then I vinify with the whole bunch, and we crush with our feet, like old times.
Oh, get back to it,
Because I wanted to use the stem in order to reinforce the backbone of the wines, because Malbec sometimes lack a little bit of structure. So with the whole bunch and with the stem, you improve the backbone. You help giving texture. And then the wine was fermenting and aging in concrete. So my view is that I don't want to talk only about the nose and about the flavors in the mouth. I want to talk about the texture of these kind of soils.
Yeah. No, this is fast. So this is Concreto. This is a wine that is just making its way back onto our shelves, and I'm so excited that it is, because like you said, it is, I mean, all three of these are such unique expressions of Malbec. They're unique expressions of terroir, of climate, of everything that comes from being a mountain wine. And I haven't tasted this wine actually since I was with you in Argentina in March. So I'm really, really excited.
But the interesting thing, Gabriel, is that we have been tasting 3 Malbec. And we are, if you taste the 3 of them, one next to the other, are completely different. So the problem for me, if you only talk about the grape, you are talking about the commodity. But when you talk about the Uco Valley, when you talk about San Pablo, when you talk about Altamira, you're talking about uniqueness. So for me, the main important dimensions of a wine is the place and who makes the wine. And this is the biggest definition. Also, when I go to Burgundy, I always choose the wine from the place and who makes the wines. And many times I prefer to drink a village because I have more confidence in the producer than a Grand Cru from other producer. So all this relationship between place and who makes the wine is impossible to divide.
Yeah, and there's nothing more true than looking at these wines, because there's something so wonderfully approachable about Q. I mean, there's a lot happening in this bottle. It's complex. You don't feel like you're ever getting shortchanged with it, but it's soft. It's much prettier. It's much easier. That's a great weekend wine. Then you start getting to the San Pablo, and oh my goodness, you start seeing this whole new definition of Malbec, this whole different style in comparison to what you just tried. And then coming back to this Concreto, unbelievable. Like you said, the structure of this wine is not something you'd anticipate. Even tasting the two before it, which had its own power to it, nothing even close to this third expression here. And I really wish the viewers at home had the ability to taste the entire lineup, just as you had us do in Argentina, because it keeps going from there. You keep raising the bar and raising the bar and raising the bar, and getting smaller and smaller in place and bigger with wine. It's amazing what's happening there.
You know, I think the Uco Valley has nothing to envy to any place in the world. I think the energy that the place has is a lot, and it's our work to discover and to express this energy.
Yeah. I'm seeing another great question here, and actually, this is I'm really glad that somebody asked this. It's being asked here: do you believe it's worth to decant these young wines, specifically from your mountains, even being coming from they weren't oak aged? There's obviously concrete age to it. There's not big flavor coming from there. But what's your take on decanting? How are these structured to drink young?
You know, my view, and this is my view, is that great wines are great from the beginning. And in general, I don't like to decant because I feel that I lose the first part of the wine. So I like to open the wine and start drinking from the beginning in the glass, because at the beginning, maybe the wine is a little bit more closed, but with the time, the wine will be opening. The problem for me when you decant is that you lose this first step of the wine that for me, many times I like, because you have more softer aromas, this kind of herbs that you can find. So in general, I prefer not decant.
You like the romance of it. You like to build up to it. You like the drama of opening the wine, seeing how it's developing, seeing where it is now, and then seeing how it develops.
So you need, it's for that in general, when you want to open a great bottle of wine, it's difficult when you are 15, because you are going to have one opportunity. But when you are 5, 6, you have the opportunity to see the evolution. Also, I like to open not one bottle at the same time. In general, I open 3 or 4 bottles at the same time, because it gave me the opportunity to see the evolution. I told you, I'm a drinker before a winemaker. It's my passion.
I love that line. Love that. No, certainly. And the last time I had a bottle of the San Pablo at home, I drank it over the course of 3 days. The same thing. I wanted to pull that cork.
Yeah, I love that to do this.
I knew what was happening. And then, there was another bottle hanging around. And then, 2 days later coming back to it, and there was still so much life to it. Not that it wasn't great to begin with, because you're right, that second glass of the first day was wonderful, but that last glass 3 days later was still so complex and still generous. Really fascinating to see how your wines are developing over time, how they're developing in the glass. And
And
I
I
agree with
love
you.
and I
Get
love
on
to
that.
leave the bottle from one day to the other day and to the other day, because you can see the wines that because some wines you open and the next day are destroyed, and some wines are better and better, and you can see there how is the aging potential of the wine. So if you go
Yeah.
to my house, you say who lives here, because there are open bottles in the fridge.
It's the same. We try and hide our recycling too, just so the neighbors
Yes.
don't think anything of it. um, we've taken up a lot of your time already. I'm so grateful that you were able to find time in your schedule, especially now, especially getting into a time when you have to be in the vineyards more and more and more. One last thing that I want to talk about, and something that really surprised me visiting Argentina for the first time, because when they came to me and said, "Oh, you're going to go to Mendoza," I was like, "All right, cool." I never really considered South America for travel, and I was shocked at how easy it is. Right now, for those guys at
Yeah.
home, Argentina is 2 hours ahead. There's no jet lag. It's not like European travel. But I kind of want to get your take on traveling to Mendoza. What are some of your favorite parts of Mendoza? And, for those at home that are quarantining, they've been stuck at home for the last 6, 7 months now, and they're itching to plan that next trip. Talk about what it would take to get to Zuccardi. Tell us how easy it is to actually, find ourselves in your vineyard.
Argentina is a great country to visit because you have a lot of diversity of places. You have the Patagonia, you have the north of Argentina where you have the Iguazu Falls. You have Buenos Aires, that really is a city that is full of culture, and Mendoza, that is the wine capital of Argentina. I'm in love with the place where I live, and I feel that Mendoza has a great combination between wine, nature, and food. And
Definitely.
it's extremely easy to visit Mendoza because it's easy to arrive, because the connections, you can arrive through Buenos Aires or through Chile, through Santiago de Chile. The city is close to the wine areas, so you can sleep in the city, and where you have very good restaurants, and then every day go to visit different wineries. But also, if you don't want to visit only wineries, you have a lot of activities to do in relationship with the nature. You can do trekkings, you can do rafting, you can do many good activities. And the best thing of the place is the people, of course, but also that the weather in general is very sunny and fantastic. So I think it's a great place to visit Mendoza. And today you have many opportunities to spend 3, 4 days doing different things. And come to visit us. It's also very simple because we have one restaurant that is 1 hour from Mendoza, that is in our winery in the Uco Valley, and you can come to and visit us and have a Zuccardi experience that will be full of nice place, good food, and good wine.
Definitely. Real quick, getting another great question from our viewers at home here. They're asking about aging your wines, and what do you think the life in the bottle is? Do you think that there's an ideal time frame for drinking after 6 months, a year, 2 years? And how do you see the development of your wines over the course of, say, a decade? Where do you think is the best window there?
I told you before that I think that great wines are great from the beginning, and then you decide how you like to drink.
Of course.
My view is the wines that we are making today has a very long aging potential. I think Polígonos will age very well for 10, 15 years without any problem, and Concreto maybe for 20. But it's something that we are going to discover together. But all depend the style of wines that you like to drink, because if you prefer to drink younger wines, has no sense to age. But if you prefer to drink wines that has some age, I think are wines that will age very well. We only need patience. But let's see. I think I say this because I believe that the place and the soils where we are cultivating has the potential to age, and also because I can see that the vinification, the way that we make the wine, is trying to look for long aging potential.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. All right. I've taken up so much of your time. I'm going to ask you one last question. Sebastian Zuccardi has a bottle of San Pablo Poligonos. What is he having for dinner with it?
You know, for me, the wine is pleasure, but wine is part of the table. Wine is part of the meal. But I like when happen things around of the table. And in Argentina, we have our main important meal is asado, that is a barbecue. And the asado never start in the table. The asado start when you turn on the fire. Mm-hmm. So the asado start 2 hours before or 3 hours before to lunch. And I like all what happened around the table, around the fire. So if I have to tell you, not only because the combination of the wine with the food, also because the culture of my country, I believe that asado, like ribs, mm-hmm. with this wine work fantastic, because you have a little bit of fat in the rib, but then in the wine you have texture, you have acidity, you have freshness that will clean all this fat.
That's perfect. Well, you got me hungry. Sebastian, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing these wines with us. Thank you for making such great wines. The viewers at home, everyone in the Binny's Nation in Chicago, thank you guys for tuning in. This will be live on or available on Facebook to view over and over and over again, because I know you can't get enough of it. Thank you again, Sebastian.
Take care. Thank you, well. Gabriel. And see you in Argentina.
I'll see you again in Argentina, definitely.
Bye-bye.